Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us for a Tax Practitioners Board webinar. My name's Julie Shaw, and I'm joining today from Ngunnawal Ngambri country. We respectfully acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, waters, and community. We pay our respect to them, their cultures, and elders past, present, and emerging. Now, just to begin today's webinar, I have a couple of quick housekeeping messages. First of all, if you would like to access today's slides, you can do that by visiting our webinar resources hub. You'll see the link there on your slide, but it's at tpb.gov.au/webinar-hub. Now, we'll also email you a copy of the slides following today's webinar, and we'll do that via the email address that you used to register for today's session. And then secondly, today's webinar does count towards your continuing professional education or CPE, and you can claim 1 hour for attending today. And in relation to claiming your CPE, we will issue an attendance certificate to those of you that are staying online for the duration of the webinar today. So let's have a look at what we're going to be covering. So in today's session, we're going to have a look at what data is and why it is important. We're going to look at how to protect your data. We'll look at what records you should keep and for how long. We'll also talk about how to identify a scam. We'll look at some emerging themes and challenges as well that you may face. We'll also talk about Code Item 6 and what that is and what it means for you as a registered tax practitioner. We'll also talk about client information, and we'll look at inadvertent disclosures of that information. And then to finish up, we'll share a case study with you as well, just to put everything into context. And then we'll also answer some of the common questions we received during the webinar today. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to put them through. You can do that via the chat box, and you'll find that located on the top right-hand side of your screen there. And just in that regard, we have Fiona from our policy and legislation team joining us today, and she's going to be responding to any of your questions that you have as we go throughout the presentation today. And just before we start, I wanted to introduce our speaker for today. We have TPB board member Deborah Anderson. So Deborah is a registered tax practitioner who has extensive experience as a BAS and a tax agent. And we just wanted to say thanks for joining us today, Deborah, and I'll hand over to you for an introduction.
Thank you, Julie, and a warm welcome to everybody out there, all the tax and BAS practitioners that have joined us today. Really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. I know it's end of financial year and everybody's, got a lot on, so thank you very much. We do really value your questions and your opinions, so please feel free to raise any questions that you have with us. Fiona is online to answer all your questions, and really we get a lot out of those, and they help us also develop webinars for the future as well. So please hit us up with your questions. Today's main focus for today is about collection, storage and dissemination of client data. So in particular, I'll be running through what your responsibilities are in relation to managing data in order to help you comply with Code Item 6 in the Professional Code of Conduct of the TASA. And that is specifically relating to confidentiality of client information.
Excellent, thank you. That sounds really great, Deborah. Let's kick off the session by taking a look at what data is and why it's important.
Yeah, data is a really broad term, but in essence, it's information. It's information about anything. So it could be the collection of facts, that could be numbers, words, measurements, observations, and even descriptions of things. So different organisations collect different types of data for a variety of different reasons. So data can be gathered for a specific purpose, which is things like analysis or reporting. However, data is not always translated into context. So if it's out of context or there is no context, it really doesn't mean anything at all. As a tax practitioner, you are entrusted with collecting, storing and securing a lot of personal data. The data that you collect is extremely important and must be protected. So if that data is compromised or leaked, it can lead to a variety of really damaging things such as identity theft, fraud, financial loss, and, reputational damage to you, your organisation, and even sometimes your clients or suppliers.
Thanks, Deborah. Some good points to consider to start us off today. How about if you could give us some examples next of what records should be kept and for how long?
Sure. So let's talk about some of the records that you have access to first. So as a tax or BAS agent, you will have access to your clients' TFNs, their identity documents, their signatures, their name, full names, remember middle names, etc., or names they prefer to be called under, or their legal names, their contact information, home address, telephone numbers, their dates of birth, their bank details, employment details, super fund details, health fund details, spouse information and all of their details, investments. And if I talk about non-individual clients, it can also be all of the above, plus their employees' TFNs, the customer and supplier information, their supplier bank details. So as you can see from just that short list, agents are entrusted with a significant amount of data. In terms of how long to keep those records, under the TASA, there are no mandatory requirements. However, under the Taxation Administration Act 1953, you must keep client tax records for 5 years. And I really want to emphasise here regarding identity documentation. Please remember, we do not require, and in fact, we strongly recommend that you do not keep copies or originals of any identification documents of your clients or their representatives, and that if you have or had copies, you should delete and destroy them securely. Because agents are such a rich source of information, we recognise agents could be at an increased risk of being targeted by criminals, whether that be physical or cyber, and these documents may be at risk of being stolen through cyber attacks or physical break-ins at your business, or with working at home, that could be a break-in at your home. An unfortunate reality is that a large number of these situations that I have personally seen at the TPB and have heard from colleagues have actually been done by people that the agents trusted, their employees, their friends, and in some cases, their family, which is really sad. All that said, we absolutely do require that you maintain a record of the information, such as a checklist or proof of identity checks that you've done. My suggestion is you treat the information as you would a credit card authorization or information, and only record minimal information that if you are compromised or your data is compromised, it's unusable. So, for example, if you're getting a driver's license, put New South Wales driver's license XXXX with the last number on it, or something like that identifies that you have checked it, the date and time obviously and how, but you can prove that you checked it by the numbers. But if that data was compromised, it's unusable. Our recommendations are also consistent with the Office of the Australian Information Commissioner's guidance. So, feel free to have a look at their guidance as well.
Thanks, Deborah. That's a really good point there to have a look at that information. There's some really good source of information, and I think it's also really important to comment as well that managing clients' data is also subject to an increasing number of regulatory compliance requirements, including privacy and protection laws, which lead us, I guess, to the next point in our discussion. Can you talk us through the steps tax practitioners should take to protect client data?
Yeah, thanks, Julie. The collection of personal information and protection of the data is of paramount of importance. And I think the fact that a lot of the webinars that we've been doing at the TPB have all been about or are discussing the protection of data. So, this is an area that is really important. Registered tax and BAS agents have obligations regarding taxpayer privacy and securing personal information under both the Privacy Act 1988 and also the TASA. The Privacy Act sets out a number of privacy principles which govern the use of, the storage and also the disclosure of personal information. The Privacy Act covers organisations with an annual turnover of more than $3 million. However, where a tax or a BAS agent has annual turnover of less than $3 million, but they are a tax file number recipient, their handling of tax file number information may still be subject to the Privacy Act and therefore subject to notifiable data breaches scheme. And that's a really important point to note. And I'll also mention here that when you are dealing with tax file numbers, that just does not mean tax agents. It also means BAS agents. You are dealing with tax file numbers, particularly of the employees of your clients. The Notifiable Data Breaches Scheme requires organisations and agencies covered by the Privacy Act to notify individuals likely to be at risk of serious harm by certain data breaches that have involved their personal information. They must also notify the Office of the Australian Information Commissioner, or the OAIC, gosh, so many acronyms, who is responsible for administering the scheme. And this includes registered practitioners and would cover data breaches resulting from a cyber attack. Entities that are already covered by the Privacy Act must comply with the scheme, and that includes Australian privacy principal entities as well as TFN recipients, to the extent that TFN information is involved in that data breach. The TPB recommends all tax practitioners ensure they have the right procedures and systems in place to secure your client's personal information. You need to be prepared to conduct quick assessments of suspected data breaches, and it's also really important to provide training to all employees on cyber hygiene and any role that those employees may have in responding to data breaches. We also recommend you regularly review and update your personal information security, as that can reduce the risk of a data breach occurring in the first place. And this includes, and it's not limited to, but includes ensuring that you do not ever share your MyGov ID and always use multi-factor authentication wherever possible. We also recommend that you have a plan of when, how and what to do in the event of a data breach, remembering that you do have obligations under the Privacy Act and notifiable data breaches schemes, including things such as notifying individuals, affected individuals, I should say, and what you must include in that notification. So, for example, in that notification, you must include recommendations about what steps they should take or could be taken in response to the data breach. Now, before I move on, I just touched on some of those preventative measures that you can put in place to help yourself from being a victim of a cyber attack. But I would have to say the most valuable tip that I can possibly give you is to be proactive. There are so many published tips out there to protect client information on various websites. But these points have been made in the context of having sufficient IT control. So as a minimum, the TPB considers the following to be best practice. Install and maintain antivirus and anti-malware on your workplace computers. Deploy firewalls in your workplace computers and also on your networks if you have one. Ensure that your computer's operating system and your programs that you're using always have latest security patches. I'll also note there that our phones these days are just an extension of our computers. We can access a lot of our systems online. So please make sure that they are also updated with the latest security patches. Protect your client records or files using encryption wherever possible, and preferably zero-knowledge encryption. Regularly change your passwords. Use a password manager, and please do not share passwords. Again, never share your MyGov ID for any reason ever. That is your personal ID. So sharing it with the person you're sitting next to is like giving them your bank login information. Where possible, always use a second form of authentication. So, use SMS or Google Authenticator to protect all your online accounts. And those accounts can be things like your email or other software like your Xero or your MYB, wherever possible.
Thanks, Deborah. Some more really useful tips there. On that note, can we move on now to talk about scams in general? Would you be able to tell us exactly what a scam is?
Sure. So scams are a common way that criminals compromise your identification or your online accounts. A scammer's goal is simply to trick you into giving away your personal information or paying money. They'll use a variety of techniques. They can use email, SMSs, phone calls, social media, and often pretend to be a person or even an organisation that you trust. Scammers use all kinds of sneaky approaches to steal personal details, and even use things like your Facebook quizzes to get answers to security questions such as, what was your first car? What is your favourite colour, etc. Once obtained, they can use identity information to commit fraudulent activities, such as using your credit card or opening a bank account in your name. Knowing what types of scams there are and what to look for could save you from becoming a victim.
Thanks, Deborah. Are you able to also give us a little bit of information on different types of scams and how we can spot them?
Sure. Look, as I said, there are various types of scams, and the cyber criminals are very good at what they do and are constantly creating new ones. So the ones we go through today might not necessarily be the ones that are out there next week. It's important to be aware of scams in general and their consequences and take necessary precautions to stay secure in this digital world. Identity theft is arguably one of the most serious consequences of scams. And identity theft occurs when someone uses your identity to steal money or to gain other benefits. Once your identity is stolen, scammers can do some really serious damage. As I said, they can open bank accounts, they can take out loans, credit cards in your name, they can sign contracts in your name, things like phone plans and all sorts of things. Gaining access to your government online services, and obviously as a tax or a BAS agent, that can have some really serious implications. And they can also do things like steal and access your superannuation and so much more. Currently, there are 6 types of common scams. So the first one is phishing. And that is where scammers trick you into giving away personal information. And, for example, they might lure you into clicking on a malicious link or an attachment that looks legitimate. Scammers may impersonate your bank, a government department. ATO have been particularly hit with, people trying to be an imposter of them. And also ask you to give out information such as your account number, your passwords, or your credit card numbers. Phishing scams, or scammers, I should say, often play a long game in that they bank your information. They compile a bit of a database of what you like, all your information. And once they get enough, they use it or they can sell it on the dark web. Malware is where you are tricked into installing software on your phone or your computer that gives scammers access to your files and they can track your activity. And malware can come in lots of forms, so, you need to be aware of that one. Ransomware is where cyber criminals take control of your system or lock down your system, and they demand payment for you to regain access to a particular software or a particular set of files or even your entire computer. Spear phishing. Now, this is basically phishing messages but are really targeted at specific people or specific organisations. And they're actually really, really dangerous because they often know a lot about the person that is being targeted or the organisation. So spear phishing messages can be really, really difficult to detect and are often targeted at key people in an organisation. So that might be someone like the accounts payable or the payroll department, if I put it into the context of our industry. Remote access is where scammers falsely claim to be from a known company and or a bank or an internet provider, and they trick you into giving them remote access to your computer. And a common one here is the one where the Microsoft call, where they say that your Microsoft account has been compromised and they need to log in to be able to help you fix it. It's one that a lot of our parents are getting caught with. And finally, hacking, and that's where cyber criminals break into your devices by exploiting a security weakness, and that's often when you haven't done your patches or security upgrades. So they exploit the security weakness in your device or your network, and they gain access to your data.
Thanks, Deborah. Could you move on now to let us know some of the common indicators of scams and what people should look out for as well?
Sure. As I said, these are evolving, they're changing all the time, but some of the common ones that are out there at the moment and things you can look out for are a suspicious sender's address. Now, they're very clever, as I said, and they may use an address that looks really similar to a legitimate business. Often they just change one letter or a few characters. And in some cases, they, instead of having, say, .gov.au, they might have .tech or something along that line. So checking the email address is one way of doing it. And you should be hovering over the email address if you are suspicious in any way, shape or form, because that will often give you the real address behind the name that comes up on your screen. They often have generic greetings and signatures, so scammers may use generic greetings such as "Dear valued customer" or "Sir and Madam," or include really limited contact information in the signature block. So, they may just have "Director" at the bottom or, something like that that doesn't actually have all the information. And they are strong indicators of a phishing email. The other thing is spoofed hyperlinks and websites. Now, malicious websites may look identical to a legitimate site. They've simply just copied in many cases, but the URL may again have a slight variation in the spelling or again a slightly different domain name at the end. So, for example, instead of having .com, it might be .net or something really subtle like that. Sometimes really difficult to tell the difference. Spelling and layout. This one's probably, in most cases, I find this one a lot easier to detect because they have misspellings, they have really bad grammar and punctuation. So inconsistent formatting is also an indication of scams. And personally, I get a lot asking me to do US tax returns. Here attached is all the information for my schedule, whatever. And I'm like, oh, dude, I don't know what that is. So, those ones, in in most cases, I think are a lot easier to work out. And also suspicious attachments. Unsolicited requests to open, download attachments are red flags. If in doubt, don't do it, is our advice. The Scam Watch and also the Australian Cyber Security Centre's websites have a lot of really in-depth information about what I've just talked about there, and Julie will send you a link to their websites in the email following this webinar.
Thanks, Deborah. We'll send those through following the webinar, as you said. We're just going to do a quick poll now. So we'll get this poll started. We do have a couple of quick polls that we've got planned for today. So they'll just pop up on your screen, and all we ask you to do is select the correct response from the list. So what we wanted to ask you this time is, have you been or do you know someone that has been a victim of a recent scam? So I've got 3 options to choose from there. So the first one is, yes, I have. Yes, I know someone that has, or no, I haven't. So I'll just give you a few seconds to answer that, and then once we've got the results, we'll come back and we'll share those with everyone. Okay, thanks everyone for putting through your responses there for the poll. I'm just going to close that one off now, and then we'll share the results. So hopefully everyone should see those results on the screen. If you can't, I'll just let you know what they are. So we've got about 17% of people that say that they have been a victim of a recent scam. 40% of people say, yes, I know someone that has. And it looks like about 43% say, no, I haven't. So, Deborah, I'll hand back to you now so you can just talk through those results with everyone. Thank you.
Yeah. Wow, 43%. That's really impressive, actually. I'm surprised it's that high. It's a bit like, have you had COVID, isn't it? Interestingly here, you know, the vast majority of people have been scammed, and, you know, a lot of people here have known someone that has. And I know recently I know of a cyber security expert that got done with a crypto scam. So, you know, it's anybody is vulnerable to it, and you just have to have one weak moment or just let your guard down for a split second. So, yeah, we all need to be on the lookout for that.
We definitely do. On that note, Deborah, how about we move on to what to do if your data has been compromised?
Yeah, look, if you have experienced a breach, the first thing I recommend that you do is, and I go back to, this is where the plan of having a when, how and what to do really comes into effect, right? Because often you don't have much time, and also you're in a heightened state of panic, you know. Number one, stop the breach if it's occurring. After that, and you've managed to get it under control, we recommend that you phone the ATO's Client Identity Support Centre, and that's 1-800-467-033, and advise that you've had client data compromised. And they will work through with you and also for your clients to protect them. Review the OAIC's information about notifiable data breaches. You need to tell affected clients and staff about the data breach. If appropriate, contact a software provider if it's involved software. Take steps to safeguard the compromised information. Update all your security controls and software. Update your passwords and review systems access and remove it for people who no longer need it.
Great, thank you for that, Deborah. Considering what we've gone through so far, would it be okay now if we go on to some emerging themes and challenges, and I'll get you to share some of your knowledge around that, please.
Sure. Over the years, I have seen significant change to how business is conducted and the ways that we interact with each other. You know, we've gone, in my career, you know, from all paper to pretty much all digital. One of the things that I've seen is a change in the speed of response that technology has provided us and the expectations from clients to receive information from us much more quickly and in some cases instantly. In the past, we would have corresponded with clients via mail, but today email and even SMS create increased pressure and expectation to get information and answers out much more quickly. Data protection and privacy laws are becoming increasingly complex and impacting more and more of us. Organisations need to stay up to date with the various laws and regulations that apply, as well as keeping up to date with the rapid changes in technology. The challenges of protecting systems and data will only become more difficult as time goes on. Companies must review how data is managed, and that includes constant monitoring of who has access and how the data is being used. This means having living policies and procedures for managing data, as well as a process for ensuring compliance with data protection laws. A set and forget policy or a procedure will probably be out of date before it finishes printing. I think it is safe to say that the rate of change will only continue, if not, go even faster. However, while all this change occurs around us, one thing that remains constant is your obligations under the TASA and the role of the TPB to protect consumers of tax services. As a registered practitioner, you must adapt to these changing business practices and client expectations while ensuring that you are meeting your obligations under the TASA and in particular the Code of Professional Conduct. These obligations are designed to ensure that consumers, your clients, can be confident that the service that they receive from a registered tax practitioner meets the professional and ethical standards that are required. So today I'll drill down into the 4 key challenges for practitioners that are all linked to the developments in technology. And these are changes to accounting software, the impact of cloud computing in a broader sense, the implications of offshoring and outsourcing arrangements, remembering they are different, and of course the impact of cyber attacks. I'll start by taking a look at the growing sophistication of accounting and tax and business management software. So when we speculate about the future of the tax profession, the impact that software will have on the role of practitioners is a particularly hot subject. The initiatives relating to initiatives such as single touch payroll are an example of how software is being utilised to streamline reporting for businesses. Some of the questions you may be asking are, can the role of the tax practitioner be automated? Could software ultimately replace the value that a tax practitioner adds? While software can complete many of the processing tasks, tax practitioners provide a service that involves a high level of qualification, a lot of experience and skill, and something that technology may never be able to replicate. My view is that tax laws are complex and accounting software alone will not ensure compliance. Software can provide opportunities for tax practitioners to bring added value to clients through efficiencies, increased analysis and application of the data that you're providing to your clients. Tax practitioners, however, add value by applying tax law to the specific and individual circumstances of your client's business or their individual returns. So practitioners make sure that data is accurate. They make sure that everything has been reported correctly. They also make sure that there is substantiation. So, and that's particularly important when claiming deductions and also things like the correct amount of GST. Many tax practitioners also produce and analyse reports for their clients to improve their business. And technology can free you up from focusing on all that really nitty-gritty processing to do much more higher level analysis, advising and streamlining your clients' information and make your client's business more responsive, efficient and productive. The four main emerging themes that I will touch on now are cloud computing, outsourcing, offshoring, and cyber attacks. Cloud computing is the use of computer services through an online network, typically over the internet, instead of using a local server or a personal computer. So that includes things such as storing, managing, and processing data. When appropriately used, technology like cloud computing can really help tax and BAS agents to meet those growing client expectations by using those, really up-to-date digital systems. Among the many benefits include reduction of costs, lower maintenance of software and hardware, and enhanced productivity. It also provides flexibility in terms of what sort of device you'd like to use, the location, independence, and it also potentially reduces the need to do business face-to-face, as we're doing now. In the old days, we'd all have to meet in a big cold hall. Along with these benefits, practitioners must also consider their obligations under the code, and in particular, we're talking about Code Item 6, which relates to the confidentiality of client information. And I'll take a little bit more of an in-depth look at Code Item 6 later in today's presentation. Tax practitioners are increasingly using cloud computing for a wide range of purposes, and they include information storage, lodgement of things like returns, and that's tax returns, it's payroll tax returns, ASIC, a whole range of things. Really importantly, digital signatures, client information portals, practice management software, and client identification as well. So as a registered tax practitioner, you must understand the nature of any cloud computing arrangements that you enter into, and particularly how these arrangements impact the storage and use of your client's information. The next emerging issue that I'd like to raise is the impact of outsourcing and offshoring for tax practices. And I mentioned they are, different, but often work hand in hand, not always. Outsourcing involves where you enter into an arrangement with any third party for them to provide a specific service or an activity. It can involve transferring portions of the services that you provide to third parties rather than doing that yourself, or it could be to reduce costs or even engage specialists. Offshoring occurs when you enter into an arrangement or transfer a service or activity from Australia to a location outside Australia. And that may involve the use of a third party or outsourcing, or it could still be just an offshore location for people that work directly for you. So, they are different, but often go hand in hand. In regard to the use of outsourcing and offshoring, there are two particular code items that warrant attention. They are Code Item 6, which is the confidentiality of client information, and also Code Item 7, which states that you must ensure that a tax agent service you provide or that is provided on your behalf is provided competently. The final emerging issue, the impact of cyber attacks. So a cyber attack is a deliberate exploitation, that's a big word, of computer systems or networks. And the TPB recognises the emerging threat of cyber attacks and the importance for all tax practitioners to proactively protect themselves, their practice, and of course their clients. Recent statistics indicate that data breaches in Australia are on the rise at a very alarming rate, particularly in the financial and the healthcare industries. And a couple of recent examples we've seen are Canva, which suffered a data breach impact of 137 million of its clients. We've also seen Latitude, an Australian personal loan and financial services provider that was affected by a data breach that impacted over 14 million people in Australia and New Zealand. And, of course, the Optus breach, which was one of the biggest security breaches ever in Australia, with 9.8 million compromised records. The ATO has recently had to deal with the biggest GST fraud in Australia's history. And the fraud was originally promoted on social media channels, TikTok, but spread to enablers and used social media to spread to enable offerings to help individuals to invent fake businesses in order to claim GST refunds that they weren't entitled to. The taxpayers involved alleged to create a fake business, obtain an ABN, which was then used to submit fictitious BAS statements to claim a fabricated GST refund.
Thanks, Deborah. There was a lot of great information for everyone to take on board there. How about we move on now to Code Item 6 and how it relates to our topic of discussion for today. So could you begin by letting us know what Code Item 6 is? Thanks, Deborah.
Yeah. With the changing business practices and all the advances in technology, confidentiality is a really, really important issue. So under Code Item 6, you must not disclose information relating to a client or a former client's affairs to a third party unless you have obtained your client's permission or you have a legal duty to do so. So let me break that down and look at that requirement for you in a little bit more detail. Information refers to the acquiring or the deriving of information, of knowledge, and it includes but is not limited to capturing information that you know about a client, and that information could be acquired directly or indirectly from the client or any other source. It's also, it's only necessary that the information relates to the affairs of the client. It doesn't even have to belong to the client, and it certainly doesn't need to have been directly provided to you by the client. So information will relate to a client's affairs if it's information that has a connection with the activities, the business, or the concerns of a client. Now, when we're talking about confidentiality in Code Item 6, a third party means any entity other than the client and you, the registered practitioner. And so that includes things like people related to the client or the practitioner. So if you're using an outsourced contractor, or even if you're a BAS agent and a tax agent working together under separate businesses, that's a third party. Even if you work together all the time in the same office, you need to be really considerate of the confidentiality there. It also includes entities within the same structure. So, you know, you might have a service trust structure, but unless the client is defined, so for example, in your engagement letter as the whole structure, and, you know, in many cases it's prudent to actually list who is included in that. And it also includes when you are dealing with off-site external data storage systems, and we call that, cloud storage. That could be, your simple ones like Dropbox, Sync, iCloud, all of those types of things as well. Julie?
Yep, thanks, Deborah. How about we have a look at under what circumstances a practitioner can disclose client information?
Yeah, so similar when disclosing any information relating to your client's affairs to a third party. One, you need to clearly inform your client about the information you will be disclosing. You need to advise your client whom and where the disclosure will be made, and you need to obtain your client's written permission. And I think that one is, probably should have said that one first because it's so important. The permission can be via a signed letter of engagement. It could be a signed consent form, or it could be another communication with your client. Now, you may also disclose information relating to your client's affairs to a third party without your client's permission if you have a legal duty to do so. So some examples of those circumstances that you may need to do is if, for example, the TPB issue a notice under the TASA for production of information. It could be a court or tribunal following a direction, a court order, or another court process. And it could also be information formally requested under Section 35310 of the Taxation Administrations Act 1953, which is subject to the material being properly withheld under legal professional privilege. If you are concerned whether there is a legal duty to disclose client information to a third party, you should consider getting independent legal advice before you do anything.
That's really good to know. Thanks, Deborah. Can you also talk us through what's considered an inadvertent disclosure of client information?
Yeah. Firstly, you must ensure that you have appropriate arrangements in place to prevent inadvertent disclosures of client information. So an inadvertent disclosure of client information could occur through really simple things like the use of a mobile or Wi-Fi, public Wi-Fi, I should say, in shopping centres, airports, all of those types of things. So, making sure that there are appropriate controls to prevent third parties from inadvertently viewing client information. It could be other simple things like instead of shredding office paper, you're trying to do the right thing and you are recycling office paper, on the back of a tax return that you were checking, for example, and that might have personal details that concern the client on there. It could be leaving client information in an unsecured location, which could be accessed by a third party. And, most of us think that's a file or something like that, but, how many people leave their phone or their laptop in a taxi, for example? So making sure all the appropriate security controls are on your devices. Speaking about devices, it's also about disposing or selling, destroying, trading in equipment, laptops, computers, telephones, etc., that contain or store data that may be accessible by a third party. So, you need to be really mindful and careful if you are upgrading your computers or your telephones and even your multifunction printers, because remember, they all have memory in them. And remembering to protect the security and the confidentiality of your client records by making sure that you completely delete and destroy any data contained on a hard drive of any equipment that you are discarding or reselling. Using a shredder or a shredding or data disposal service, and also consider things like when you're using external service providers. So it might be that you've got an IT person that logs into your systems to do IT maintenance ad hoc. Who are they? you know, you are actually giving a third party access to your client's data. You need to be aware of that. And again, go back to the simple things, cleaners. So many people have cleaners at home. It's not just cleaners in the office. And now that people are working from home, you need to be aware of that. And also the use of virtual meetings to discuss client information. And I know when COVID first hit, one of the platforms that was doing online meetings, people were able to access the meetings without any passcode. And, you know, the radio actually, they were doing a competition to hack in to people's meetings. So you need to be aware of who is online, you know, and who is also sitting in the room with the people that you are online with. So on that, I'm going to have a drink of water. So I'll hand over to Julie to do another poll.
Thank you, Deborah. That's some really useful tips there as well. Let's jump into our second poll for today. So this one's a scenario that you may encounter. I'll just launch the poll now and I'll read through the scenario for you. So we have Jackie, and she runs a local coffee shop in Melbourne. Jackie engages Tony, and he's a registered tax agent, and he's engaged to prepare and lodge her outstanding BAS and also to provide tax advice regarding the proposed sale of her coffee shop. Tony separately engages Bella, who's a registered BAS agent, to prepare the outstanding BAS. Before sharing Jackie's information with Bella, what do you think Tony should do? So we've got a couple of options. The first one is nothing, because Bella is a registered BAS agent, so Tony can share the client information freely. The second option is seek Jackie's permission to disclose her information to Bella. And the last option we have is let Jackie know that he is disclosing the information to Bella. So I'll just give you some time to put through your responses, and then we will come back and share the results in a second. I'll just leave that open for a couple more seconds just to give you a chance to put through your responses. Okay, we might close that one down now. So thank you everyone for taking the time to respond. We'll share those results, and Deborah, I'll hand back to you to walk everyone through those. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just waiting for the results to come up. Sorry.
Well, that's okay. I can read them out for you, Deborah. It looks like we've got about 94% of people saying B is the correct option, that he should seek Jackie's permission to disclose the information to Bella.
Wow, you know how impressed I am. Thank you, everybody, for listening to me this morning. Although you probably, I'm really pleased that most people did pick option B, because B and C were so close together. But Tony must explain his arrangement that he has with Bella under Code Item 6. And he must get Jackie's explicit permission to disclose the information. So just telling Jackie about it, oh, by the way, you know, blah, 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 is not good enough. So in this case, B is the correct option. So well done, everybody.
Wonderful. Thanks, everyone. And thank you, Deborah. Let's move on now to explain what tax practitioners can expect if they fail to comply with this code item, so code item 6, and I guess the code more generally.
Okay, so, well, the Code of Professional Conduct, and I'll call it the code, provides a range of administrative sanctions available to the TPB that the TPB can impose if a registered practitioner fails to comply with it. So there are also a number of civil penalty provisions in the TASA that relate to certain codes of or certain conduct of registered practitioners, and certain activities of those who are acting as unregistered practitioners. Now, you know, I say this in all the webinars, but we do recognise that the majority of registered practitioners do the right thing, and we thank them for that. However, occasionally, we are finding that practitioners are failing to comply with the TASA, including the Code of Professional Conduct. And in those cases, we may impose one or more administrative sanctions or even seek an order for a court-imposed civil penalty. The sanctions we currently have available to us are a written caution and orders. So an order might require the practitioner to do a certain thing. So that might be pay your tax. It might be lodge your returns. It might be complete a course of education or training that we specifically specify. Or it could be limiting the services that you could provide, and even say that you need to provide services under the supervision of another agent. In the serious end of the sanctions, we also have suspension and the termination of registration up to a maximum of 5 years. The severity of a sanction depends on the nature and the extent of the breach and the individual circumstances of each and every case. Practitioners have the right to review at the AAT for any sanctions that the TPB does impose, other than a written caution, that is, and the AAT provides an independent review of the decision. If a registered practitioner fails to comply with the code, that may also be relevant if they meet the fit and proper person requirement under the registration requirements as well.
Thanks for taking us through that, Deborah. So our last part of the presentation today is to take a look at a case study, and this is a real-life case study. So I'll hand back to you to share that with us all. Thanks, Deborah.
Thank you. In this particular case, we have a tax agent where the tax agent company's employee was found to have disclosed a former client's tax information without the company's knowledge and in breach of the company's policies and procedures. And they then disclosed that client's information to a third party. The employee advised that she was unaware the client in question had ceased to be a client of the company, and she thought that she was acting legitimately when she accessed the information and provided that onto a third party. Based on the information available to our board conduct committee, we determined that the company had breached code item 6, which was the confidentiality of client information. And that was because the agent, the tax agent, through its employee, disclosed information relating to a former client's affairs to a third party without that client's permission or a legal duty to do so. The board conduct committee noted that the company did not have adequate internal systems in place to protect their client information and guarantee security. However, the company had now revised its policies and procedures to ensure that similar issues could not happen again in the future. And the new policies and procedure included staff training to emphasise client confidentiality, the requirement to obtain consent before any disclosure, and of course system changes to ensure that access to a former client's tax information is removed once the client notifies the company that they no longer wish to use their services. So when the board conduct committee took all that into account and the fact that the employee was also let go, the board conduct committee decided to issue the company here or the business here with a written caution for the company failing to comply to the code.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Deborah. Just to finish up today's session, I just wanted to share some information with everyone on how to stay in touch with the TPB. I'd really like to encourage you all to follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook and Twitter, and that's where we'll keep you up to date with the most latest information available. We also have a newsletter that goes out each month, which is TPB e-News, and you can subscribe to that on our website, and you'll see the website is up there on the page. But to get to the subscription page, just go to tpb.gov.au/newsroom. Also, if you're interested in attending more of our webinars, you can register on our website as well at tpb.gov.au/webinars. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel, and if you do that, you'll receive notifications when we post new videos. We also record all of our webinars and have a comprehensive library available for you to watch at your leisure, and the really good part about that is that you can still claim your CPE for viewing the recording, so that's really great to know. And then just to finish up today, I just wanted to say a big thank you to Deborah for providing all that useful information. I also want to say thank you to Fiona for assisting with the questions today. And I'll just let you know that we will be sharing a FAQ document on our Webinar Resources Hub in a few days or so, just with all of the questions that came through during the webinar today. So you'll be able to access those shortly. And finally, just to finish up, I'll be launching an exit survey, which will open up in your browser once you leave the webinar today. And we would really appreciate it if you could take the time to complete it. It's very quick, just takes a moment of your time, but it is really useful for us in terms of feedback. It helps us improve on the webinars. And also, if you've got topics that you'd like to hear about, please let us know in the survey, because we do look at that, and we endeavour to put on webinars that are of interest to you and things that you need to know about. So once again, I just want to say thank you everyone for joining us, and we hope that you enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll speak to you again soon. Thank you.